When my fiancé looked at our holiday pictures from when I was a child, he froze in shock. "Don't you see it?" he said, terrified. "See what?" I replied. And only after he showed me did I realize that everything was about to change. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. Christmas Eve had always been my favorite night of the year. The house filled with cinnamon scents, twinkling lights, laughter, and the warm embrace of family, a picture-perfect tradition, unmarred by time. That particular evening, however, something felt oddly different, even before we gathered around the roaring fireplace. I shrugged off the strange sense of unease, convincing myself it was merely nerves about introducing my fiancé, Jason, to my family for the first time. Jason had always been the epitome of confidence, charming, attentive, and never at a loss for words. Yet, tonight, his usual charisma was replaced by an unsettling quietness. His hand gripped mine tightly, and his eyes, typically warm and inviting, darted anxiously around the living room. I noticed how he occasionally took deep, steadying breaths, as if bracing himself for some unseen revelation. We gathered after dinner as always, forming a comfortable semicircle around my mother as she proudly pulled out the old photo albums from the worn oak bookshelf. Each Christmas, she relished the chance to retell stories from my childhood, embarrassing yet endearing anecdotes that never failed to ignite laughter. My father leaned back comfortably in his armchair, while my siblings lounged lazily across the couch, their eyes rolling playfully in mock irritation. As my mother opened the first album, Jason shifted uncomfortably beside me. I squeezed his hand, offering reassurance. He responded with a stiff smile, his jaw tense. "Here's Emily at 3, covered head to toe in chocolate frosting." My mother chuckled, turning the album to face the group. My siblings erupted into laughter, but Jason's gaze fixed oddly on the photo, his expression draining of color. My heart skipped slightly. "Are you okay?" I whispered softly, brushing his arm. He nodded, eyes still locked intensely on the album. Each turning page seemed to amplify his discomfort, his body growing more rigid with each memory shared. I noticed small beads of sweat forming along his forehead, catching the soft glow of the Christmas lights. Then, it happened. As my mother flipped to a photograph of me around 5 years old, Jason suddenly inhaled sharply, as if punched in the gut. He froze, eyes wide in shock, color completely draining from his face. His hand, which moments before had held mine lovingly, now felt ice-cold and rigid. "Jason," I whispered, heart pounding in alarm. He didn't respond. Instead, he leaned closer, studying the photograph intensely, as though it held an unimaginable horror within its innocent edges. My family, oblivious to his strange behavior, continued laughing and reminiscing, unaware of the silent storm erupting beside me. "Jason, please say something," I pleaded quietly, panic beginning to swell in my chest. Finally he turned to me, his eyes filled with a combination of confusion, fear, and disbelief. "Don't you see it?" he whispered urgently, voice barely audible, strained with desperation. "See what?" My voice trembled, anxiety twisting sharply inside me. He shook his head, pulling away slightly, seeming lost in his own internal nightmare. "You really don't see it," he repeated, as though genuinely astonished that I couldn't understand the horror playing in his mind. My confusion spiraled into dread. What had he seen in those photographs? And why did my sweet childhood memories suddenly feel like a sinister puzzle? Before I could press him further, my mother's cheerful voice sliced through the tension. "And here's Emily with her first bicycle. Remember how you crashed right into the rose bushes, sweetheart?" Whatever Jason had recognized in that photograph wasn't merely a funny childhood anecdote. It was something deeply unsettling, something powerful enough to steal the breath from his lungs, turning our warm Christmas evening into a chilling mystery. As the family continued flipping through pages, Jason sat rigid, gaze unfocused and jaw clenched tightly, as if fighting an internal battle. I reached out again, gripping his hand more firmly, silently begging for reassurance. His fingers trembled slightly under mine, his pulse quick and uneven. What had begun as a perfect Christmas Eve quickly transformed into a night of unexpected dread. I realized with a sinking heart that something buried deep in the past was clawing its way to the surface. Something dark, powerful, and devastating. The photograph that had frozen Jason in terror now haunted me too, whispering the question I'd been afraid to ask. Once the guests departed and my family retired to bed, the house fell silent, illuminated only by the fading glow of Christmas lights. Jason and I sat alone in the dimly lit living room, the tension between us palpable. "Jason, please talk to me," I begged softly, kneeling beside him as he stared blankly into the dying embers of the fireplace. "What did you see in those photos?" Confusion swirling with unease. "Familiar? How?" I never understood what she meant by family secrets until tonight. Everything felt disturbingly fragile, built upon layers of hidden truths. "Jason, do you realize what you're implying?" My voice trembled slightly, barely above a whisper. That somehow our families, our pasts, are connected? But when I saw those photos of you, especially the one of you as a little girl, I felt like I was staring at a ghost from my own past. Something is terribly wrong, Emily. I need to know the truth. How could the man I planned to marry recognize my childhood photos, ones he had no logical reason to have seen before? My throat tightened painfully. "Jason, you're scaring me," I admitted, my voice wavering. "Do you really think my parents would hide something so important from me?" "We'll find the answers together, whatever it takes." As I examined each photo, my heart ached with a growing sense of betrayal. My parents, always warm and affectionate, now felt distant and mysterious. Every smile captured on film seemed to hide secrets, every memory tainted by doubt. Who was I, really? And why did my perfect childhood suddenly feel like a carefully orchestrated lie? The growing suspicion became unbearable. Finally, I gathered the courage to confront my mother, hoping desperately for reassurance. It was early morning, days after the unsettling Christmas Eve, and the kitchen air was still thick with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. My mother, oblivious to my turmoil, hummed cheerfully as she prepared breakfast. "Mom," I began hesitantly, my voice slightly shaky. She looked up, smiling warmly, unaware of the storm brewing within me. "Those photo albums we looked at on Christmas Eve, do you remember anything unusual about them? Or anything strange happening when I was younger?" "Why would you ask something like that?" Jason must be confused. Photos can look similar, memories blur, I'm sure it's nothing. In that instant, the emotional pain deepened into humiliation. My own parents, whom I'd trusted implicitly, were deliberately concealing a truth that defined my very identity. The betrayal felt raw and sharp, as though they'd torn apart the fabric of my childhood, leaving me vulnerable, exposed, and lost. Unable to bear the heaviness any longer, I retreated silently from the kitchen, tears stinging my eyes. My family, once the foundation of my security, now felt like strangers holding me captive within a web of lies. Jason found me shortly after, curled silently on the sofa, eyes brimming with tears of humiliation and hurt. Without a word, he wrapped his arms tightly around me, his quiet strength offering the only solace amidst the growing storm of doubt. "We'll uncover the truth," he whispered firmly, determined yet gentle. "I promise you, Emily, no matter what it takes." The days that followed felt like an eerie fog. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. Every interaction with my family seemed scripted now, like we were actors in a play about a life I no longer believed in. The house that once radiated warmth and familiarity had become a labyrinth of half-truths and hidden corridors, and I was determined to find the exit. Jason and I returned to the city earlier than planned. Neither of us said it aloud, but we knew we needed distance from my family. The very air in that house felt poisonous now, thick with secrets that refused to stay buried. Back in our apartment, the search for answers became relentless. I started with my birth certificate, at least the one I thought was mine. Jason helped me scan through every line, every date. It looked official, no surprises. But something about it felt too clean. No hospital name, no attending physician, just my name, a generic birthplace, and my parents' names typed neatly, as if copied from a form. I called the hospital listed. After being transferred twice, a tired-sounding clerk confirmed, "Sorry, ma'am. We have no birth records under that name for December 23rd, 1995. Are you sure of the details?" I found myself in the living room at 3 a.m., scrolling obsessively through my childhood photos again. I looked at my face, not the smile or the outfits, but my features, the shape of my nose, the arch of my eyebrows, the color of my eyes. And then it hit me. I looked nothing like my mother, or my father, or my siblings. I had always brushed it off as coincidence, but now, every difference screamed at me. How had I never truly noticed? The next morning, I confronted my sister Caroline. She was always the closest to me growing up, the one who protected me when I got bullied in school and covered for me when I stayed out too late. I hoped she might tell me the truth. We met at a quiet cafe near her office. I didn't waste time. "Caroline, am I adopted? I just want to know who I am. Why didn't they tell me? Do you know who my birth parents are?" Under the guise of wanting to know more about his family's past. That's when everything started coming together. Jason's grandmother eventually revealed that his uncle had a daughter who disappeared as a baby, under strange circumstances. It had always been a source of quiet shame in the family. The mother was unstable. The father vanished shortly after the child's birth, and there were whispers that the child had been taken in by friends of the family. "Emily, you're my cousin, but maybe now we can find the truth." While your own family watches in silence as the curtain is yanked back to reveal that your entire identity is nothing more than a prop. After Jason and I confirmed the truth, we were cousins, and I had been secretly adopted under dubious circumstances. Rage bubbled beneath my skin. But it was the silence from my parents that hurt the most. I sent them a carefully worded email laying out what I knew. No response. I called. Straight to voicemail. It was as if, in the face of being exposed, they chose cowardice over redemption. I wanted answers. I wanted dignity restored. But more than anything, I wanted to take back the power they had stolen from me. And I knew exactly how to do it. Every year, my parents hosted a post-New Year's brunch for close friends and extended family. It was always a meticulously planned affair, complete with mimosas, quiche, and the same plastic smiles that had papered over so many lies. This year, I RSVP'd with a chilling sense of purpose. If they wanted to keep up the facade, then they'd have to face the truth in front of everyone. Jason supported the plan, albeit with concern. "Are you sure you want to do this there?" It all went into a neat manila folder labeled, without irony, family. My mother flitted about with her usual hostess energy, as if nothing had happened. My father lingered by the kitchen island, laughing with a neighbor about his famous smoked salmon. They didn't acknowledge us when we entered. That changed quickly. I walked straight to the center of the room, cleared my throat, and said, "I have something important to share. It's about who I am, and who I'm not. My past was hidden from me. I have the documentation right here," I said, holding up the manila folder. The hospital's denial, photos, family testimonies, evidence of how two families hid a child to avoid scandal. "You manipulated my life because you were scared of what the truth might cost you. To anyone here who thinks family means pretending everything's fine, ask yourself what kind of love requires deception." Jason followed, and as we stepped into the cold air outside, I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding since childhood. For the first time in my life, I felt clean. The aftermath of my revelation at the New Year's brunch rippled through the family like a tidal wave. Text messages poured in, some apologetic, others confused, and a few angry. But I ignored most of them. The people who mattered had already shown me who they were through their silence, their lies, and their priorities. Jason and I didn't return to my parents' house, not even to retrieve belongings. I sent a courier for a few childhood keepsakes. When the box arrived, it contained none of them. Only clothes, a few books, and a hastily scribbled note from my mother. We thought we were doing the right thing. Please understand. We no longer talked about wedding plans. We didn't talk about what our relationship meant now that we were blood relatives. The romantic bond had frayed under the pressure of revelation, leaving something deeper, more painful, but strangely more honest. One night he stood in the kitchen, staring at a photo of us from before all this started. We looked so carefree, so young. "Do you regret meeting me?" he asked, his voice low. I paused, the question heavier than either of us wanted to admit. "No," I said honestly. "You helped me uncover the truth, and you stayed when it got hard. Coming to terms with the truth that we weren't meant to be lovers. But that didn't mean we didn't love each other. We were family now. In a way no one else would ever understand. I'll still be in your life," he said, "if you'll let me." I needed to know more, not just about the people who raised me, but about the ones who gave me up. It took time. Records were incomplete. Names had been changed. But piece by piece the story emerged. My birth mother, Helena, had been 19 when she had me. No support, no stability. My biological father, a man named Leonard, was Jason's uncle, a man whose name had been erased from family memory after a tragic car accident the year I was born. After his death, Helena fell into a spiral of grief and addiction. She lost custody of me shortly after. That's when my parents stepped in. Friends of Leonard's, apparently. They had no children of their own at the time, and according to the social worker, they took me in under the guise of temporary guardianship. But they never gave me back. Somewhere along the line, they rewrote the narrative, even to themselves. That's when the lies started. Helena was still alive. When I learned that, my breath caught in my throat. She had gotten clean years ago, rebuilt her life. But she had no idea where I'd gone. Every effort to locate me had failed. She thought I had been adopted overseas. The heartbreak of losing me, she told the caseworker, was a grief she never truly recovered from. I agreed to meet her. It was a small cafe in a quiet town 2 hours away. Jason offered to come with me, but I needed to do this alone. I arrived early, my heart hammering in my chest as I watched the door, wondering what kind of woman would walk through. And then she did. Helena was older than I expected, with silver strands streaking her once dark hair, but her eyes, my eyes, were unmistakable. She approached slowly, cautiously, like I might disappear if she moved too quickly. "Emily?" she said, voice trembling. I nodded, unable to speak. She reached out but stopped herself, tears welling. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know. I didn't know they kept you." About the mistakes, the regrets, the years lost. There was no anger in her, only sorrow and hope. "I don't want to replace them," she said softly. "I just want to know you. However you'll let me." I let the name roll through my mind, not as a replacement, but as a rediscovery. A part of me I hadn't even known was missing. As I drove home that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because the lies were gone. I finally had the truth. And in the rubble of betrayal, something new was growing. My story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The decision to confront my family again was not one I made lightly. After reuniting with Helena, my birth mother, and learning the truth of how I came to be raised by the people I once called Mom and Dad, I knew I couldn't just let things lie. Not for revenge this time, but for closure. Jason encouraged me, even though it meant revisiting the pain. "This isn't about them anymore," he said. "It's about you choosing how this ends." They approached 10 minutes later, hand in hand, older somehow, as if the weight of my silence had aged them. "Emily," my mother began, voice cautious. "I go by Leah now," I said gently. "At least, I'm trying to." The sound of ducks and rustling leaves filling the gaps in our silence. Finally, I turned to them. "Why didn't you ever tell me the truth? Why go so far to erase where I came from?" "You were stealing me. We had always wanted children. You became our world. She deserves to know her daughter, and I deserve to know her." My mother said something I didn't expect. Can we be part of that life, even just a little? I need to figure out who I am without you defining it. A trail from the life I thought I had to the life I now knew was mine. And then, I did something unexpected. I started writing. A memoir of sorts, titled simply, Becoming Leah. The act of writing became its own form of therapy, its own quiet revolution. And slowly, the pain became purpose. Jason eventually moved out. We both knew we needed separate paths to heal fully. But we remained close, family in a truer sense than many blood relatives ever become. And Helena? She called every Sunday. She sent old baby clothes she'd kept, scribbled letters I wrote when I was barely talking. Each artifact a breadcrumb back to the girl I had been and the woman I was becoming. The tension that once ruled my life gave way to something steadier, stronger. Peace, not from forgetting, but from understanding. And so, on one quiet afternoon, as I closed the last page of my manuscript, I whispered to myself, not with sorrow, but with strength. It began with a voicemail from Helena. "Hi, Leah. I don't know how to say this, but I think there's something more you should know. It's about Leonard, and I'd assumed that was the end of his role in my story. But I was wrong. Helena invited me to her home. It's better if I show you," she said. I drove out that same weekend. Her home was modest but warm. Photos of gardens and art lined the walls, and she'd even framed one of our recent pictures together. It felt surreal, like visiting an alternate version of my childhood. We sat down, and she handed me an old, faded envelope. My name, Amalia, was scrawled across it in delicate handwriting. Inside was a letter, sealed for years. "I found this in a box of Leonard's things I'd stored away," Helena said. "I didn't open it until recently. I wasn't ready, but it's yours. Then you've come looking for the truth, and I hope in time you find it with grace and courage. You were born into chaos. Your mother and I loved you more than life itself, but we were not equipped to give you the life you deserved. I feared what might happen to you if we stayed together, especially after I began to see things unravel in Helena. I made a decision, one I will regret until my last breath. I gave you to my friends, hoping they would offer you stability and love. I asked them to raise you as their own, but also to tell you when you were ready. I never intended for them to keep you in the dark. If they didn't, I am sorry. I don't know what kind of person you are now, Leah, but if you have even an ounce of your mother's fire and your own strength, I know you will find your way. Please don't let my cowardice define your future. Reclaim your name, your voice, your story, and know that somewhere, in the short life I had, you were my only pure joy. Leonard, it was a story of failed intentions, of people trying to do right but faltering in fear. My father hadn't vanished. He had made a tragic choice, one based on a warped form of love and desperation. He had trusted the wrong people. Helena was crying softly. He loved you. Even when he gave you away, he thought he was protecting you from me. The heartbreak wasn't just about betrayal now. It was about loss. The loss of a man I'd never known, who had wanted to do the right thing and still failed. The pain wasn't sharp like before. It was dull and heavy, like carrying someone else's sorrow along with my own. That night, I sat alone on Helena's back porch, watching the stars. I thought about Leonard. I imagined him writing that letter, hoping someday I would find it, hoping I would forgive him. I didn't know if I could, but I knew I had to try. And in that quiet, still moment, I whispered aloud. I decided to honor Leonard the only way I could. I included his letter, verbatim, in the final chapter of my memoir, because his voice mattered, because my story was no longer just about the lies I was told, but about the truths I uncovered, even the ones that hurt. That was the turning point, the final key. I had been broken open, exposed, and reassembled, piece by piece, secret by secret. And now, finally, fully, I was whole. Revenge doesn't always come with flames or fury. Sometimes it arrives in the form of calm, piercing clarity, when the ones who lied realize you've taken back your story, and nothing they say can rewrite it. That's exactly how I chose to deliver justice. Not with violence, not with rage, but with truth, made public for all to see. The final phase of my reckoning came through my memoir. Becoming Leah wasn't just a personal project anymore. It was a declaration. It laid bare everything. The hidden adoption, the falsified documents, the betrayal by people I had once called parents, and the web of secrecy that stretched across 2 families. I submitted the manuscript to a small but respected publisher that specialized in memoirs centered on family and identity. The editor, a sharp woman named Aisha, called me within days. I couldn't put it down, she said. It's heartbreaking, it's brave, and people need to read this. Legal vetting, fact-checking. I anticipated resistance, but I was prepared. Every claim I made was backed by documentation, hospital denials, testimonies, family photos, even Leonard's letter. My parents were contacted as a courtesy, given a chance to respond. They didn't. The silence was expected, but it didn't stop the press from rolling. When the book launched, it was modest. Just a few bookstores, a quiet rollout. But within weeks, it exploded. Book clubs picked it up, social media threads dissected it, podcasts invited me for interviews, people related deeply to the themes, identity, betrayal, the longing to belong, the courage it takes to step into truth. I watched as my story spread, not out of ego, but with a strange mix of sorrow and power. I wasn't just healing my wound. I was giving voice to others who had been gaslit by the very people they trusted most. Then came the media requests. A daytime talk show, a segment on NPR, a panel at a literary conference titled Family Lies and Finding Yourself. But in front of the audience that had always mattered most to them, the community. My parents were pillars in their neighborhood. Sunday churchgoers, volunteers, the kind of people others saw as kind, generous, unshakably moral. The very brunch where I first exposed them was just a ripple. The book created a wave. At the conference, during a live-streamed Q&A, an audience member asked, "If your parents are watching this right now, what would you say to them?" And the truth, my truth, is no longer yours to hide. "And you were right, we should have told you. I'm sorry." "I'm proud of you," he said. I smiled. I couldn't have done it without you. But it dismantled the lies they built. And that was enough. Because they can no longer tell the story without me. Because the whole world now knows who I am. Because I am finally seen. Not as their daughter, not as a mistake to be hidden, but as me. Leah. In the quiet after the storm, I found myself reflecting on what it truly meant to heal. Not just from betrayal, but from the erosion of trust that had shaped my very existence. By now, my life had taken a completely new shape. I was no longer a daughter under someone else's name. I was Leah. And the final piece of that transformation was understanding who Jason truly was in the aftermath of our shared unraveling. After the release of the book, Jason and I maintained a gentle but consistent presence in each other's lives. What had once been a passionate romance had evolved into something quieter, deeper, a bond forged not through desire, but through endurance. We had been lovers, partners, cousins, and ultimately witnesses to each other's pain. But there was one last revelation neither of us had fully confronted: how far back this connection went. Jason called me one morning with an unexpected tone in his voice. "Leah, I've been looking into my family tree," he said. "There's more. I think we need to talk." We sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the weight of generations. "I thought Leonard was just my uncle," Jason began, pointing to a family tree. "But it turns out, he was my half-brother. My dad had a son before he met my mom. They never talked about him because of how it ended: Leonard's addiction, the scandal, his death. So, what does that make us? Even when it didn't make sense, no longer tangled, but still touching." Jason moved to another city, took a job with a nonprofit focused on family reunification. "Funny how life comes full circle," he texted once, sending a photo of a smiling child reunited with their mother. I replied, "You're doing what we never got. That's powerful." We had dinners, shared photos, even took a short trip together to a coastal town she used to visit with Leonard. She showed me where he proposed, where they dreamed of raising a family before everything fell apart. One night, as we watched the ocean waves crash against the rocks, she said, "You remind me of both of us. His quiet strength, my fire. You were never just one or the other." But I wasn't ready to engage. Instead, I wrote them one last letter. Not a plea for reconciliation, but a boundary. I explained what I had learned, what I had lost, and what I had gained. I told them I hoped they found peace, but they would no longer have access to mine. And then I signed it. With truth, always, Leah. I started volunteering with adopted teens, helping them explore their identity. Some days it was hard, watching them navigate the same maze I had only just escaped. But it also gave my pain a purpose. If I could help one of them feel less alone, it was worth every moment. People sometimes asked if I ever missed the life I had before. I would smile and say, "I don't miss the lie, but I miss the girl I used to be, the one who believed her world was safe." Still, the woman I've become, she's stronger. She knows who she is. We'd be a tragedy in the first half and a triumph in the second. But more than anything, we'd be a story about truth, the kind that costs you everything, but gives you yourself. Something rare and unexpected settled over my life. Peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of understanding. I had lived through betrayal, found my origins, and reshaped every corner of my identity. Now, the question that lingered was, who am I in the quiet, when there's no fire to put out? The answer came slowly, in everyday moments. It was in the mornings I woke up without that gnawing feeling in my chest. In the evenings when I cooked simple meals and played Helena's favorite jazz records. In the laughter I shared with Caroline over wine. In the emails from readers who said, "Your story saved me." Watching a group of teenage girls rehearse a spoken word performance. I had been volunteering at this youth center for a few months now, mentoring girls who came from fractured homes or uncertain families. I saw pieces of myself in them. The lostness, the fire, the quiet hunger for truth. One of them, a 16-year-old named Sienna, had asked me, "Is it ever really possible to forgive people who lie to you?" It had become a kind of justice, not the dramatic kind, but the lasting kind. I received one final message from my adoptive parents, an email, simple, Short. We read the book. We are sorry. We don't expect to be part of your life again. But we want you to know, we're proud of the woman you became. Even if we didn't help you become her the right way. Just quiet resignation. I didn't reply. Instead, I printed the email and placed it in the folder where everything began. Next to Leonard's letter, my birth certificate, and the note from Helena that first day we reconnected. It was the last page of a story that no longer needed additions. Jason, from his new life in another city, still wrote sometimes. He was dating someone new. He had bought a small house. "It's quiet," he said, "but it feels like mine." And what was most beautiful of all was this. I didn't write it to process my pain. I wrote it because I had finally processed it. The past was no longer my burden. It was my origin. Nothing more. Nothing less. Every once in a while, I still visit the park where I last met my parents. I don't go there to mourn. I go to reflect. To sit beneath the same tree and marvel at how much can change when you refuse to live in shadows. I take deep breaths. I feel the sun on my skin. I remember everything and regret nothing. Because here's what I learned.